Are you thinking of buying, selling, or investing in real estate, but you don't know where to start? Have you searched for a realtor who will be nearby when they are needed, who will answer your calls and emails, who will go the extra mile to ensure your every need is met, who will help you with sourcing and supplying contractors while negotiating the best deal possible? Do you need a realtor who does not believe in high-pressure sales tactics or other gimmicks? Then you need me. My name is Steve Roy, and I offer a full-service professional sales and customized marketing package for my clients. I am helping clients with buying, selling, and investing. I will build a custom plan to fit your needs. I will work closely with you to ensure that you achieve your goals. My services include not only an analysis of your local market and correct pricing, but I will also help you to prepare your home for sale and make it look as desirable as possible to buyers by providing expert advice, using professional quality photographs, and compelling descriptions. Let me help you minimize cost and maximize your profits. Call me today, 207-649-8522.
Today's program has been brought to you through the generosity of Harding's Garage, 37 Courier Road, Fairfield. By Dan and Scott's Cremation and Funeral Service, 445 Waterville Road, Skowhegan. And by KSW, Federal Credit Union, 222 College Avenue, Waterville. Hello and welcome to another edition of Kennebec Valley Forum. Today we have Ron Chase with us again, and he and his lovely lady wrote a book called Mountains for Mortals. It's about peaks and valleys of Maine, more or less.
More or less, actually New England. We do hikes in every one of the 6 New England states.
So how did you get to do the book? Why did you do the book?
Well, it's kind of an interesting story. I did the book because I love hiking, but when I retired from the IRS, my wife and I had a truck camper, and we decided to spend the winter. Actually, it ended up being about 5 months traveling in the South and the Southwest, and we hiked and biked and kayaked, and I had it in my mind that I wanted to try writing professionally, so I decided that I'd keep a travelogue and try to sell the idea of a travelogue book when we finished.
Yeah.
If I'd known what the publishing world was like, I probably wouldn't have had that thought at all. But at any rate, I did. I kept a travelogue, and when we returned, I was fortunate enough to get an assignment with the Lewiston Sun Journal, writing an outdoor column.
Oh, yes, I remember that.
And I also was able to write articles for several other newspapers and magazines, all of them outdoor articles. And then I started marketing my travelogue book idea, and I contacted a number of publishers around the country. And one of them was Manassas Ridge Press, which is a outdoor publisher that's located in the southeast. In fact, their headquarters is in Birmingham, Alabama. And their managing editor, a fellow named Russell Helms, called me up, and we had an excellent conversation. It was one of those things where we just hit it off from the very beginning.
That's fantastic.
And we just connected on a lot of levels. But he was candid with me. He says, we don't really think we want to do a travelogue, but we want to move our marketing into the Northeast. And we're wondering if you'd be interested in doing a mountain hiking book in New England. because we know from your travel log that you do a lot of hiking. And my answer was succinct and short, yes. And
There you go.
so that was how that's how it came about.
Yeah.
And he and I then started to brainstorm about how we would, what the concept would be, what the book would be like. And we came up with what I think at the time was something really quite original and unique. I had never seen a guidebook quite like it, and I read a lot of guidebooks because I'm involved doing outdoor things. And the concept was that we were going to try to appeal to a very wide audience of hikers by having a combination of hikes, of easy hikes, more difficult hikes, and the most difficult hikes in New England. And we would focus on, no matter which mountain we chose, we would take the easiest trail to get to the summit with the best scenery. And obviously, as I said, we were trying to appeal to a large audience. So that was the fundamental concept behind it. But Russell and Manassas Ridge had another idea that didn't really appeal an awful lot to me, but they wanted a hike in every state of New England. And the vast majority of the best mountains in New England are in Maine, New Hampshire, and Vermont.
Right.
And there's only a handful of good mountain hikes in the other three states. So at any rate, we kicked it around, and one of the things that you learn in the publishing world is the publisher always has 51% of the stock. And that's what they wanted, that's what they were going to get.
Right.
I didn't have too much difficulty finding a good hike in Massachusetts because I had hiked to the summit of the high point, which is Mount Greylock, which is located in the Berkshire Mountains over in far western Massachusetts. So that was my choice of Massachusetts right away. Connecticut was a little bit more problematic because I'd never hiked anything there. I did a little bit of research and found that the highest mountain in Connecticut was a mountain named Bear Mountain, which is also in the Berkshires in northwestern Connecticut. And it's kind of an unusual situation because even though it's the highest mountain in Connecticut, it's not the high point in Connecticut because just a few miles away, there's a ridge that runs up to the Massachusetts border. And that ridge is actually higher than the mountain.
Wow.
But it continues to the summit, which is in Massachusetts. But the Bear Mountain in Connecticut is actually quite a picturesque mountain, and the hike that we chose connects with the Appalachian Trail. So it's an interesting hike with some nice scenery.
I can well imagine.
However, Rhode Island was really quite a problem. The only thing I'd ever done in Rhode Island was drive through it.
Oh, yes. Well, true with most of us.
And I did a little research, and they didn't have, I don't believe there was a point in the entire state that was over 1,000 feet. And I just didn't know where to go with that. And I have a friend that I hike with quite a bit, and she had a brother who at the time was living in Rhode Island, and he was an avid hiker. And she connected me with him, and we communicated back and forth, and he made a couple of recommendations, and one of them was a hill called Mount Tom, which is about 425 feet high.
Yeah.
And he said, it's really a pretty nice hike, even though it's not much in the terms of elevation. So my wife and I got in our truck camper, and we had a couple of other mountains that we were going to hike. We were going to check some peaks in Connecticut, and we went down. And it actually turned out to be quite a nice hike. It had some interesting rock formations and some nice views, and so we took the photos that we needed and mapped it out, and it became the hike in the 6th state. So that's how we ended up fulfilling the commitment we made to the publisher, and that was the concept behind the book, that we have these nice hikes in every state in New England.
Wow, they must have liked that pretty well.
Yeah, I think they did. I think everybody was happy. I mean, it was a new adventure for me because, as I said, the only thing I'd ever done in Rhode Island was drive through it. So
Sure.
they had experience at actually visiting the area and learning to know a little bit about it, that
Yeah.
sort of thing.
You have a penchant for hiking, obviously.
Yeah. It's a very important part of my life. It's kind of interesting. I didn't start hiking until my late 20s, and we were living in Rockland at the time, and just a few miles from the Camden Hills.
Oh, yes.
And those were the first mountains that I hiked.
Yeah.
And I learned right away that it was something that I really enjoyed. I find it therapeutic, mentally therapeutic to be outdoors and working up a sweat.
I find hiking to be that way, anyways.
Yeah.
Unless you're on a extreme mission or something,
Right.
Then that's more.
But I did a little bit of hiking in the Army, but it was not voluntary.
Yeah, I hear you on that one. Yeah, I can understand that.
Yeah.
I know I've a lot of times, I go hunting. I take a camera with me or something.
Sure.
I'm out there to enjoy the day, to hike, to have a good time. And I think you do find peace.
Oh, yeah.
There and in the great outdoors, so to speak, and that you can't find somewhere else.
Yeah, I used to do quite a bit of hunting, and I was a lousy hunter because I was always wandering around in the woods, not sitting still, which is the best way to do most of your hunting. And
this is true.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think some of us are in that class.
Right.
Talk to me about some of the mountains in Maine and some of the places that you've traveled. Here in Maine.
There are 11 mountains that we feature in the book from Maine.
Okay.
And I could kind of run through them and talk about them, starting with the easier ones and working up to the more difficult ones.
Awesome. Love to hear it.
Two of the easier hikes and two of my favorites that I do a lot, in fact, I've done both of these recently, are in the Camden Hills. One is Mount McGonagall, which begins right at the State Park headquarters in Camden.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And it's about a 3-mile round trip. And you hike up, the hike that I recommend in the book is you hike up the McGonagall Trail for a ways and then take the Adams Ridge Trail, which connects up near the Mount McGonagall Overlook. But on the way on the ridge, you have some really nice views of Penobscot Bay. And then when you get up to the McGonagall Overlook, you have one of the truly iconic, exceptional views in the state of Maine. You look right down into Camden Harbor.
Oh, absolutely. It's
and
gorgeous.
You have a view of Penobscot Bay and Vinyl Haven and North Haven. And so I think that's one of the easier hikes and a really an exceptional one. And there's a sort of a nice, unique anecdote about it. It's if you've ever heard of the poet Edna St. Vincent Millay.
Oh, yes.
She grew up in Camden and Rockland, and she used to hike up to the Overlook, and that's supposedly the source of some of her great poetry. So
I wouldn't be surprised, because it is beautiful up there. Right?
It's a very interesting hike. Another one that's not as well known, but actually probably my favorite in the Camden Hills, is Ragged Mountain. It's a little less than a 5-mile hike, and it begins on Route 17 in West Rockport, right next to Mirror Lake.
Oh, yes.
And
I wasn't aware of that trail.
You hike about 1.5 miles before you get out of the woods, and then you start to get up on the ledges, and then you have some really nice views looking west to the Camden Hills in the west and Mirror Lake or pond down below.
Yeah.
And then up on the summit area, it's all open, rugged ledges and spectacular views, 360-degree views. Penobscot Bay, you go up from the east side of the summit, you can see over to the mountains of Acadia National Park.
Oh, wow.
It's really quite an exceptional hike. And again, it's on the easier end of the hikes that are recommended in the book. So it's one that I do it a lot. In fact, my wife and I were down there just a couple of weeks ago. It's just a nice hike.
I bet. Especially in the wintertime.
Yes, I actually prefer hiking in the winter. I have other activities that I like during the warmer months, and I'm not that fond of bugs. So I like hiking in the winter when there aren't any bugs around. There's less people on the trails. You have a snowpack that usually is a little gentler on the joints, and so and it is beautiful up there.
Yeah.
The three additional hikes that we have in the book, I'm sure you're somewhat familiar with Acadia National Park.
Oh, yes, yes.
They're really, the mountains of Acadia National Park are truly unique, and we're blessed to have that area in our state. The easiest one that I recommend over there is Champlain. It's about a 2-mile hike. And you leave from, I believe it's Route 3, and even though it's quite steep, there are a series of switchbacks. So it's even though you gain a lot of elevation quickly, it's with switchbacks, and so it's not quite as strenuous. And it's one of the reasons that I recommended it as an easy hike.
Sure.
And from the summit of Champlain, you can look west to Cadillac Mountain.
Yeah.
Or you can look down into Frenchman Bay or the eastern portion of Penobscot Bay, or you can take a glance down into the town of Bar Harbor. So it's quite a special place to be.
Yes, yes.
Another hike that is a real favorite of mine is Parkman and Ball Peaks, and neither one of them are awfully high compared to some of the other summits in Acadia, but it's right in the middle of the mountains of Acadia. So you're surrounded by beautiful peaks and lovely views. And it's about a 3-mile loop hike where you hike up over Parkman Peak first. Both peaks are completely exposed, so you have 360-degree views. And then you hike just a short ways over to Bald, and then you drop down and come back to the start. And you also, from Bald, you have some very nice views looking west down into the eastern portion of Penobscot Bay, and you can see Cranberry Islands.
Oh, yeah.
Beautiful, beautiful spot.
Oh, you're talking about some real unique scenery.
Yeah, and as I said, I really believe that there's probably nothing quite as exceptional on the entire East Coast as Mount Desert Island and Acadia National Park. So,
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. And a lot of people come from all over the world just to experience.
oh, they do, yeah.
They really do.
And another hike that I like a lot in Acadia is Cadillac.
Oh, yes.
The iconic peak, and a lot of people who haven't hiked it have driven up to the summit because there's a road there. The hike that we recommend is about a 5-mile round-trip hike up the North Ridge Trail, and at the higher elevations it parallels the road. And then you come out, obviously, to one of the most beautiful places in Maine or in New England or in the whole United States.
Right. When
you're at the summit of Cadillac. And you have similar views to the ones that you have on Champlain. Very, very nice hike. And it's not an awfully difficult hike. It's a little more difficult than the first 4 that I talked about, but it's not awfully difficult.
Yeah. There's a lot of people that like to just go out and walk and hike in a minor sense that they want to take a short trip. They don't want to go 10 or 12 miles, to do something, but they do like to take a hike. It sounds like this is a good place for them to go and to really see some fantastic scenery.
I think living here in Maine, if you want to get started in hiking, then the Camden Hills or Acadia National Park are really the ideal places to go. The hikes that I just mentioned are true mountain hikes, but there are shorter hikes in both areas that you don't have to work quite as hard, and you still have exceptional views. And, they're both, the Camden Hills, part of them are in the state park. Almost all of the mountains on Mount Desert Island are in Acadia National Park. Yeah. So there's something of a controlled environment.
Yep.
And I think I recommend them for anybody.
That's great, because hopefully there's a few viewers out here in the audience that do like to hike and sometimes are looking for a nice place to go. And
Yeah, I think your viewing audience, probably it's about a 1 hour drive down to the Camden Hills. And
it's not bad for a day.
no. And most of the hikes that you would do are going to last 2 to 4 or 5 hours. So if you leave here in the morning, you could do a hike through the middle of the day and be home for dinner.
Right. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, outside of Arcadia, you've done some stuff.
Yeah, another hike in Maine that's we rate is on the easier end is Pleasant Mountain, which is what they call a monadnock, a mountain that stands by itself, and it's located between Bridgeton and Freiburg in western Maine.
Okay.
And in fact, there's the northeastern end is where the ski area is, and I can't having a brain cramp. I can't quite remember what the name of the ski area is, but the rest of the mountain has a series of hiking trails, and we recommend the Southwest Ridge Trail, which obviously comes up on the southwest side of the mountain. But what's special about it is that most of it is exposed. So as you hike up towards the higher elevations, you can turn around and look at the White Mountains and Mount Washington and the Presidentials and have wonderful views. And,
that's a lot better than climbing Mount Washington.
Yeah, it's a lot easier. A lot easier.
Go up there so you can see it at least.
And that's about a 6 mile hike. And there's an organization, I think it's Echo Loon organization that maintains the trails.
Oh, wow.
They've acquired easements to some of the property. They've done a wonderful job there, and they've marked the trails very well. And so it's, and as I said, that's one of the easier hikes that we recommend. And I go over there a lot, but I'm semi-retired, and on a nice day, especially this time of year, I go for a hike. And
there you go.
I can get there in a little over an hour from Topsham, and so from this area, maybe an hour and a half.
Yeah.
But, a very nice hike.
Yeah.
Another hike that I don't think has is well known as some of the other mountains in Maine, but a really exceptional hike is Tumbledown, and Tumbledown is a little west of the Farmington-Wilton area.
Yep.
And it is really a spectacular mountain. It has that rugged rock formations on the upper elevations. I consider similar to Mount Katahdin. It's just, and yet the hike is about, the hike that I recommend up the Parker Ridge Trail is about a 6 mile round trip hike.
Yeah.
A beautiful mountain tarn up there, and there are, I think, 3 peaks on Tumbledown, and they sort of surround this beautiful mountain tarn, and it's just a very idyllic, scenic location.
I remember when they packed trout up there to put into the pond.
Yeah, that's right, yeah.
As far as I know, there's still trout in there.
I believe the last time I was up there, I think there were people fishing.
Yep.
I'll tell you a funny story about hiking up there. My son Adam was probably about 7 or 8 years old, and Nancy and I and some other friends hiked up, and we worked up. It was the middle of the summer, and we worked up quite a sweat.
Oh, I bet.
And so Adam said, "Well, I'm going for a swim." So he stripped down to his shorts and dove in, and he was in about maybe 10 seconds.
Yep.
It's just like jumping into an ice cube up there.
It's wicked cold water. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I understand they've closed the Chimney Trail.
They have. I did that with a friend years ago, but it was after they'd closed it. I mean, it was, and it's kind of a dangerous trail, and certainly don't recommend it because there aren't any good. It's very steep, and there aren't any good foot holes, and so you put yourself in a lot of jeopardy.
Yeah, a lot of those rocks roll down.
Yeah.
That's the way we used to go up the old Chimney Trail. And, and it was a little bit arduous, but it wasn't bad.
I went up there years ago with my friend Gary Cole, and he had hiked it when he was a kid, and he said, "We ought to try this chimney." So we went up, and he had his dog, which was a fairly good-sized dog, and we got up in that area where the chimney is, and
Oh, yeah.
the dog couldn't climb,
Oh.
and we literally had to pass him up through the chimney.
Oh, wow.
And Gary went up first, and he pulled
Yep.
him, and I pushed him, and
There you
was
go.
hoping he wouldn't do any business while I was pushing
Yeah,
him.
that's right.
And we got him up there. But we went down the easy way.
Yeah, I bet. Yeah, that's good. That's on the Swift River Road way to get to that. But the easier, I should say, it's not really easy, is going off the Well Road and up through to it.
Yeah, I was trying to think. We went on that dirt road. We start the Parker Ridge Trail starts from the trail from the dirt road that runs
Back
between
road to Weld.
Weld and by
Coos Canyon, Byron.
by the
Goes
notch.
through
Yeah.
Byron, yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Another good hike that most people have heard about is the Mount Bigelow, or Bigelow Mountain. And that's one that is one of the more difficult hikes that we have in the book. And it's about a 9-mile round-trip hike to the summit of Avery Peak, which is a 4,000-foot peak. Avery is named after, I believe his first name was Myron Avery, who was one of the pioneers of the Appalachian Trail. And most of the hike is below the tree line, but if you looked at Bigelow, you know that there's a fairly extensive section that's above tree line, and Avery is above tree line, and you have, from the summit, you have some wonderful views of Flagstaff Lake and the Bigelow Ridge, and then you can look west and see Sugarloaf and the Crockers and Spalding and Mount Abraham and the Saddleback Range. So there's some lovely views up there.
I can well imagine, but that is a little more intensive.
That's right. That's one of the more difficult hikes that we recommend. As I said, we have a cross section of hikes, and there's 3 more main hikes that we have, and all 3 of them are located in Baxter State Park, which has the most spectacular mountains in Maine, and other than the Presidentials and the White Mountains, the most spectacular mountains in New England. And one of the peaks that we chose up there is one that I've done a number of times, North Traveler. And it's in the far northeastern corner of Baxter State Park. And you access it from the Mattagamon Road, which comes in from Patton rather than the normal access from the Millinocket end. And North Traveler is a moderate hike in terms of difficulty, and the trailhead starts at the South Branch campground, which is in Baxter State Park.
Yeah.
And it has, you only have to hike about a mile on the trail before you're partially above tree line, and just some wonderful views of the entire Baxter State Park area. And you can look down into South Branch, which is sort of an inland fjord. The pond is completely surrounded by mountains, and it's a lovely area.
Yep.
And one of the reasons we chose it is because a lot of people that hike are in search of solitude. And North Traveler is a place where you can usually find some solitude. In the middle of the summer, there might be a lot of people there because they're camping, but most of the time it doesn't have a lot of congestion. Unlike the remaining 2 peaks that we have in the book, which are the 2 main peaks of Mount Katahdin. And you really couldn't do a New England guidebook without having a couple of trails to Mount Katahdin.
Yeah.
And, we chose, both of them are difficult in terms of the amount of distance and the demands that they make physically on you.
Sure.
So there certainly aren't hikes that we would recommend that someone start out doing, but once you get your fitness level up, they are probably the 2 most exciting, interesting hikes in Maine. The easier of the 2 is Hamlin Peak, which is a little below 5,000 feet in elevation, and the lesser known of the 2 peaks on Katahdin. And the trail that we recommend is to go up Hamlin Ridge, which begins a little bit to the north of Chimney Pond, And Hamlin Ridge is completely exposed ridge, and you have the Chimney Pond Cirque on one side, and you have the Northwest Basin Cirque on the other.
Oh, wow.
And so you just
Yep.
have a continuous view as you hike up the ridge
That's
to
amazing.
the summit. A lovely, lovely hike. And then the final hike is Baxter Peak, which is the high point in the state of Maine. And it's just a few feet under a mile high. They built the cairn up so that the top of the cairn is over a mile high.
Yeah.
And you have, again, the hike up there, there are 3 or 4 different ways to go, but any way that you go, you're going to have wonderful, wonderful views. And then when you get to the summit, you can look to sort of a southwesterly direction at Knife Edge, which is a fairly narrow ridge that's about a mile long that goes over to Pomola Peak. And it's pretty spectacular. There's some areas that are very narrow and probably not for people who are comfortable with heights. And we're actually, the book, the cover of the book has a picture of my son and one of his friends standing on the northern end of Knife Edge.
Yep.
And I actually took that picture from close to the summit of Baxter Peak. So
Wow. That's pretty in depth.
Yeah.
You've got quite a comprehensive book here to do that, and tell us a little bit about the stories, if you will, that's inside of the book as well as a part of the guide.
Yeah, as I said, Russell Helms, the managing editor of NASA Ridge, and I brainstormed a lot about the book, and we believe that we came up with something that's quite unusual and unique, and I will talk about the contents. I mentioned that I had never seen a guidebook that was quite like it, and then a couple of years after it was published, I noticed that the Appalachian Mountain Club guidebooks were beginning to look a lot like my guidebook, which I guess is flattery, is a compliment, so I'll take it as that, and maybe we made the right choices. There's a number of things that make it kind of original and interesting. One is we begin with what we call mountain recommendations at the very beginning of the book. And what we do is we categorize the 30 mountain hikes in the book and to different types of hikes. And we for instance, one category would be family-friendly hikes, and another would be the easiest hikes, and then the more difficult hikes and the most difficult hikes. We also break them down according to out and back hikes. In other words, you start from the trailhead and hike to the summit and then return to the same trailhead. Then we have loop hikes where you start from one point and you hike to the summit and take a different trail but end up at the same place. And finally, traverse hikes where you start at one point, go over a summit or summits, and end at another place, which generally means that you've got to have a vehicle or a bike or something involved.
Yeah.
And we also categorize the hikes according to the ones that have the best chances for viewing wildlife, the most scenic, and also the ones that have the most solitude for those seeking that. So that we start out that way. Then the introduction discusses how to use the guidebook when navigating in the mountains, safety issues to focus on, how to use a GPS, and outdoor responsibility, which
that's a biggie.
I think we both can agree is something that's important. That a lot of people in an area or on a trail or something, they have a responsibility for wildlife, for keeping the trail clean, making responsible decisions, and a whole host of things. And so we talk about that. And then each mountain hike contains quite a bit of information. We have a detailed description of the hike, which makes sense. Talk about waypoints, trail junctions, the terrain, where you might be above tree line, describe various things that you'll see along the way. There's 3 photos of each hike. we have the GPS coordinates so that you can get into your vehicle and you can plug in the GPS coordinates, and your GPS will map the route right to the trailhead. We provide the length of the hike, and that's based on the computer mapping program that we have. We didn't rely on the trail signs or anything like that. We mapped it out with a GPS and measured it.
Yeah. That's very accurate.
Yep, and we have the elevation gain, which can be a very important factor in deciding what you're going to hike. For instance, the hike that we have in Rhode Island is about 400 feet. You're not going to encounter too many significant issues in that amount of elevation gain. On the other hand, on the far end of the spectrum with Mount Washington, where you have about 4,000 feet of elevation gain, factoring that into the decisions you make before you go is a very important issue.
Absolutely.
We also, I'm just going to go ahead.
All too often we read or see on the news that somebody that was hiking and got lost,
Yeah.
Preparation for a hike is a key element, and maybe you could address that as well.
Yeah, I will just a minute, because safety is an important factor, and tying in with the safety is that in our each hike we talk about the potential hazards that might be unique to that particular hike. And again, if you're on Mount Washington and you're above tree line for 2, 3, 4 hours, there are a whole bunch of hazards there that wouldn't be true of that relatively minor hike in Rhode Island. We make an estimated climbing time. We base that on what the normal time would be for someone hiking a moderate pace. Obviously, if faster hikers are going to finish quicker, and slower hikers will take more time, but we want to give somebody some sort of a baseline on what they might expect for time. We have physical directions to the trailhead. We provide a map of each hike and some history of the mountain. And some mountains don't have much in the way of interesting history, but others, for instance, Katahdin or Mount Washington, are a wealth of history that goes back a few hundred years.
Yes.
So, and we have other information that might be unique to that particular hike. We have, as I said, we have 3 photos of each hike, but we also have a section in the middle of a dozen color photos of the most scenic mountain hikes that we found while we were doing the research for the book.
Yeah.
We also recommend, in the back of the book, there's an appendix. We recommend outdoor shops for buying hiking clothing and equipment, and also locations where you can get detailed mountain maps. So we think that the contents that we offer are, at the time at least, were quite original and unique, and I think if someone uses the guidebook the way it's recommended, I think that there'll be, at least in terms of gear and equipment and the mental outlook, they'll be prepared. The physical aspect is another issue that maybe we can talk a little bit about. Sure. Safety is an important issue in the mountains, and all you have to do is pick up a newspaper or watch the evening news, and every few weeks there'll be some sort of an accident in the mountains. Accidents are a part of life. People that snowmobile have accidents. I'm a kayaker. Sometimes kayakers have accidents. Most of the time, you can avoid them. And there are just a series of things to consider in order to avoid something bad happening. And if you act irresponsibly in the mountains, not only do you end up putting yourself and your group in jeopardy, but oftentimes rescuers. So it should be something that's taken serious. And in the book, we try to make people aware of the potential hazards for the particular hikes, or hazards in general. One of the things we talk about is carrying sufficient safety equipment, gear, and supplies for the particular hike that you're doing. And again, that can vary quite a bit from the easy hike in Rhode Island to the hardest hike in the book, which would be Mount Washington. A map and compass is an important thing to have with you. I have a little kit, it's about this big, it's a little canvas bag and it's zipped, and I keep important things in it, and I just throw it in whatever pack I'm doing, whatever hike I'm doing, the hard hike or the easy hike, that little kit goes with me, and in there, among other things, is a compass. And even with the hikes that I'm very familiar with, I almost always pick up a map for that hike, or throw the book in, which has got a map. And one of the reasons is that even if I don't need the map to navigate, if when I get to the summit and I'm looking around, I get the map out and I can identify what peak I'm looking at or what pond I'm looking at and that sort of thing. So it keeps it interesting, mentally interesting. So a map and compass is very important. A lot of people take a GPS. I'm a bit of a Luddite. I kind of resist technological change. Yeah. And so I'm not enthusiastic about a GPS personally. I have a lot of friends who hike with a GPS, and they're very helpful. The downside of relying exclusively on a GPS is that sometimes they fail.
Yes, they do.
And if you don't have a map and compass and you get lost or you're confused, then you don't have anything to guide yourself out. Right. And I've been lost a couple of times, and it's very disorienting, and it's not fun.
No.
So I wouldn't rely solely on a GPS. Another thing that's extremely important is taking adequate water. And I just plain don't go on a mountain hike without water. And then in terms of how much water, we make a recommendation in the book for each hike. However, it's going to vary from person to person.
Oh, sure.
I weigh about 150 pounds. If I take a liter on a hike, then all things being equal, someone who weighs 225 pounds should probably take a liter and a half. And then you have to factor in other things like the length of the hike, how warm it is, because if you're going to sweat a lot, then you're going to need more water, although you need water even in the coldest conditions.
Oh, absolutely.
And then people vary. I ran fairly long distances for quite a long time, and I didn't carry water. And I guess I'm a little bit camel because I don't require an awful lot of water.
Yeah.
Whereas I have friends who, if they don't drink copious amounts of water, then they start getting muscle cramps and all kinds of things. So always take water, and then each hiker needs to find that amount of water that they need, and then factor in the distance of the hike, the elevation gain, but always take some water. Very important.
Yes, probably the most important thing you can do.
And then a food supply that's adequate for whatever you're doing. If you're going to be gone all day, then you're going to need quite a bit of food. If you're taking a 2-hour hike, you might not need anything other than a outdoor bar or something like that. I don't digest food awfully well when I'm hiking, so I tend to just eat high-energy foods, like these high-energy bars, or a gorp with raisins and nuts and maybe some M&Ms in it.
Yeah.
And in the winter, I eat a lot of dark chocolate. It's a good excuse to eat lots of chocolate, and you don't gain any weight because you're burning the calories right off. And the dark chocolate gives you quick energy.
Yeah, I think you just enlisted about 1,000 more climbers here.
And another factor is, for safety, is taking spare clothing. One of the things about hiking in the mountains is that it's almost always colder and windier at the summit than at the trailhead.
Absolutely.
So if you dress exclusively for the trailhead, then you're probably going to encounter conditions that you're not going to be happy with later. The key is to take in your pack those things that you'll need for the conditions that you encounter.
Right.
And in the summer, I'm hiking in a pair of shorts and a t-shirt, but I'm almost always take a windbreaker
Yeah,
and maybe a fleece sweater, because once you get to the summit, all the hard work is over.
yeah, right.
And when you descend, you're not generating an awful lot of body heat.
That's right.
And you're going to find that even in the summertime, on most hikes, you're going to need a little bit extra.
It's going to be cool.
And then when you start factoring in the winter months, I carry a pack in the winter when I do the more significant hikes that's probably 25 to 30 pounds, because I've got a couple of liters of water. I've got a little bivy sack, and some really a heavy parker, a down parker, and spare clothes and extra mittens and extra headgear. And so you need to take spare clothing, but you need to evaluate the conditions and decide from that. I mean, obviously, you're not going to take a winter pack on a summer hike
No.
to Mount McGonagall.
Right. Yeah. There is some common sense has to be used.
Right. Yeah. And headgear is another important thing. And for people like myself, I'm balding, and I run the risk of burning the top of my head. I almost always wear some kind of headgear when I'm hiking. Usually 3 seasons of the year, it's usually just a ball cap.
Yep.
And the ball cap protects the top of my head, and it shades my face.
Yep.
But in the winter, I'm usually wearing a stocking cap. I usually have a balaclava as a backup. And then in my emergency gear in the pack, I have a fleece face mask. And depending on the circumstances, you probably should have some headgear in every hike. And I know
absolutely.
My wife is light.
Hair,
my wife is light skinned. She's blonde haired, and she wears a big wide brim cap when she's hiking to protect her face and
that's awesome, because I don't care whether you're hunting or hiking or what you're doing, you need to protect your head from the sun and weather in general.
Another thing to think about is a first aid kit, and as I mentioned earlier, I have a little container that I just throw in my pack, whatever hike I'm doing, and I have some basic things in there, antibiotic cream, I think I still have some old antibiotics in there, Band-Aids, just a few basic things. If you're going to take an all-day hike or you're going on a backpacking trip, then you might want to take a full-fledged mountaineering first aid kit.
Yep.
So again, you want to vary it depending on what you're doing, but it's pretty easy. I have a little, I don't normally get blisters. My wife gets terrible blisters, and so either she or I takes a little kit where you can put these little blister patches on your feet.
Oh, yeah.
And if you've got blisters, having something like that makes a big difference.
Yep.
So
I can amen to that.
Sunscreen is something else that I almost always, when I wash my face in the morning, I put sunscreen on afterwards.
Yeah.
I'm almost always going out and doing something, and it's just a good habit to get into. But I also have a little container of sunscreen that I throw in the in my little bag, and then if you sweat the sunscreen off, you can put a new layer on. And I've just known too many people that have encountered problems because of skin cancer. And
Right.
If you're outdoors a lot, you're susceptible to that. And it, by and large, like a lot of other things, is preventable if you take care of yourself. So.
And your hike in the winter, it's probably as important, if not more important, because that sun coming off the snow is.
That's right. I climbed Mount Rainier about 20 years ago, and that's one of the things they talked about was the intense reflection of the sun off from the snow. And you do the bigger peaks in New England and the Presidentials or Katahdin in the winter, and you're getting that all day long if the sun's out. You're getting not only the sun shining down on you, but reflecting off from the snow.
Right.
So, something that I'm not a big bug repellent person, but some people, they won't leave home without it in the warmer months, and that's something to consider taking. I like to go kayaking where the bugs aren't nearly as bad in the summer, and then in the winter, when there's no bugs, that's when I prefer to hike. But bug repellent is something to consider. Another very important thing that's been a real lifesaver for me a couple of times is in my little hiking bag, I have a headlight and batteries.
Yep.
And even if it's a nice long summer day, you never know if something's going to go wrong. And hiking in the dark is not fun.
No.
And that headlight can make a huge difference. And I remember a hike we did with a couple of friends in the fall on the Crocker Mountains, and we ran into 2 or 3 different problems along the way, and the next thing we knew, we were hiking out in the dark, but I think 3 of the 4 of us had headlights. Made all the difference in the world.
Big time.
Yeah.
I sometimes think of that lady that got off the Appalachian Trail and got lost there.
Yeah.
I wonder if she wasn't pushing herself to get someplace to meet a husband or something, and darkness overcame, and she got off the trail.
Yeah, that's a lot of strange things about that story.
Yeah, there is.
Yeah.
I never understood it, but I do know once you get off the trail and it's out of sight, you better have a compass.
Compass and
or something
that you can orient with, and once it gets dark, you might as well stop if you don't have a headlight, unless you're very confident about where the trail is, because it's so easy to get lost in the dark, and it's so easy. It's so difficult to follow even the best of trails in the dark.
That's right.
So,
Absolutely.
Carry that headlight, some extra batteries, and could be a lifesaver for you.
Pretty light safety device.
Right. Yeah. Mittens and gloves. If you're going to encounter cold temperatures, then you definitely should be thinking about that. As I said, a lot of times you could have a beautiful 70-degree day at the trailhead, and when you get to the summit, you might find out that you have 30 degrees and 40-mile-an-hour winds.
Yep.
And then if you've thrown in some mittens, your hands will be a lot more comfortable. You'll be able to operate the various devices you have. I have what they call Raynos, where I lose the circulation in my fingers.
Okay, yep.
And so I don't even bother with gloves. I just have mittens, and I carry, and in that little bag that I've talked about, I throw in some chemical packs, and then if I put the chemical pads in my mittens, and I can warm my fingers right
Yeah,
now.
because that's essential. I know. I have the same problems.
Oh, yeah.
And gloves just don't cut it. And
No, they don't.
once
They
you
separate
isolate your fingers, then you're done. And it's just amazing.
Something else that I recommend, I don't always follow my own recommendation, but it's not a bad idea to throw a cell phone in your pack.
That's great. That's right. I hadn't thought about that.
A lot of the mountains, you have fairly good reception, and if you have a true emergency, then you have a means of communicating with the outside world. The one thing that I want to stress with cell phones is that you use them responsibly, and I would call it irresponsible if you make an intentional decision to do something that's very hazardous, thinking in the back of your mind, if something goes wrong, you can make a phone call and somebody will come rescue you. That puts other people in jeopardy for selfish reasons, and I don't think that's responsible, and I don't recommend that.
Right.
Something that a lot of people who aren't familiar with hiking and probably aren't aware of a relatively new invention called microspikes. They're like smaller versions of crampons. And in the winter now, I'm either using snowshoes or microspikes almost all the time. And they go on very easy. They have a rubber casing to them, and you just pull them on over your hiking boots. And the crampons are about that long. And they really are great for icy, hard-packed snow conditions.
Yeah, especially now. Snowshoes are not going to help you. And this ice and stuff we have now.
It's been a very wet winter, and most of the hiking trails, unless you catch a fresh snow, you don't need snowshoes, but most of them, you'll be really happy if you're wearing micro spikes.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. I can see that.
A couple of other things that I'll run down. We mentioned snowshoes, and under some circumstances, you definitely would want them. Inform people about where you're going. And it can be a real simple thing, like a lot of times I work out of the house and I'm semi-retired, and so if it's a nice day, I might decide to go take a drive down to Ragged Mountain and just leave a note for my wife and say, I'm going down to Ragged Mountain. Just tell somebody where you're going, and then if you don't show up for dinner, then they have some idea where you're at and where to look for you.
Right.
Even though I do it, I recommend against hiking alone. If you're alone and there's no one else on the trail and you have an injury, and it can happen to everybody,
Oh,
you've got a
absolutely.
serious problem.
Absolutely. I don't care where you're at. The accidents happen, as you said earlier.
Something
they do.
else I always do, and I heartily recommend it, is check the weather before you go. We have, in the modern world, we have all kinds of sources of information about the weather. You can look at the local news. You can get online and check the weather. Check the weather and find out. You might find out this isn't the day to go.
Right.
They're going to have serious lightning storms on the summit of a mountain that's open. Then maybe you should do something else that day.
That's right. Absolutely correct.
I advise to get some orienteering skills, learn to use a map and compass. When I was a Maine guide for a number of years, and I studied a pretty serious orienteering book, and that prepared me for the test. But then I felt like my skills had kind of diminished, and I took an orienteering course with the Appalachian Mountain Club. It's a really good idea to understand how to use a map and compass, how to find yourself, how to get out of a bad situation where you're a little disoriented. So I recommend that.
In some places, like when I was in Alaska, compass did you no good.
Yeah.
So I had to learn how to use your watch
Yep. Yep.
for a compass.
Yep.
It's very easy to do.
Yep.
But I think that's a skill that's lacking, being taught in a lot of classes and stuff, is how to read your watch so you can use it as a compass.
Right.
It's a very valuable tool.
A couple of other things to think about. Learn about hypothermia. Learn about heat exhaustion.
Oh, big time.
What brings those things on? What you can do to prevent them. And we probably don't have the time to get into the details, but there's a lot of information out there on how to prevent those problems and how to recognize them, and I strongly recommend it. I've been borderline hypothermic a couple of times, and one of the things you find out is that your motor skills stop, your ability to think rationally begins to diminish.
Right.
And so be aware of those things. Another thing that I recommend, and we've had fatalities in the hiking community, is avoid high water crossings. In fact, that's one of the things you can do with a weather forecast. You can find out if water levels are high, if it's going to rain. There was a fatality in northern Maine on the Appalachian Trail a few years ago when someone was carrying a pack in deep water and they fell into the water and they drowned. So if you get, and I've turned back from hikes that I really wanted to do because the water was too high.
Right.
You get there
Be
and
safe.
you look and say, if I try to cross that and something goes wrong, I or other people in the group are in serious trouble. So avoid water crossings. And something that's become a new problem is ticks. And you want to keep an eye out for ticks.
Yes, and dress appropriately.
Right,
for 'em,
exactly.
without
And
a
there are
doubt.
some areas that are higher tick risks than others. The high elevation peaks, for the most part, are generally not a serious concern, but at lower elevations and some of the easier hikes that we've mentioned, they're more prevalent, so be thinking about ticks.
Absolutely.
And one other thing that I recommend in terms of safety is consider taking a wilderness medicine course. It's a knowledge and skills that are transferable to the real world, but having that knowledge in the mountains is invaluable. So I very much recommend that.
Absolutely. Well, Ron, I want to thank you. The mountains for mortals is a fascinating book. I urge those who have not read it to read it, because it's informative whether you climb or you don't climb. It's still a good book. Where can people get a copy of this?
Well, it's available on Amazon and the other online outlets, and it's available in most of the bookstores in Maine. It's been out since 2008, and I always surprise myself when I go into a bookstore because I'm trying to market my other book, The Great Mars Hill Bank Robbery, and I find that Mountains for Mortals is still on stock in the bookstores. So it's still around.
Good.
Quite easy to find.
Good. Well, I want to thank you, Ron, for coming in.
Yep. Thank you for having me.
Beautiful, beautiful presentation. I just look forward to reading the book in its entirety so
Great.
that I can go through that. And I encourage anybody out there that's interested in the mountains of Maine or New England to pick up a copy of the book and read it. It's very interesting. And that'll do it on this session of Kennebec Valley Forum. We'll see you next time.
And I came here in 1986 to run it for myself, and I signed the papers, and I was owner of the Red Barn Incorporated. People come in here for the experience, more so than I think anything else. And they love the fact that somebody's actually taking the time to listen. Maybe you learn in proportion to how much you listen and care. Might pay the bills and can if you can find that balance between doing what you love that isn't really work, that resonate with people, and actually to some extent help people. Without my customers, I would be doing what I don't love, guaranteed.